Welcome to the Goodman Report podcast. I'm Mark Goodman, principal of Goodman Commercial, a leading force in Vancouver's real estate market. Our firm is proud to be one of the top names in rental apartment buildings, development land, and commercial investment properties. Building on over 4 decades of commitment to advocacy and education, the Goodman Report is here to dive into the world of real estate, exploring the latest trends, market drivers, and insights. And along the way, we'll also introduce you to some of the most influential and fascinating voices shaping the industry. Let's get started. Beau Jarvis is the president and CEO of Wesgroup Properties, one of Western Canada's largest privately owned real estate development and asset management companies. Based in Vancouver, Wesgroup has been building communities for over 60 years, delivering more than 10,000 homes along with millions of square feet of commercial, industrial, retail, and mixed-use space. Born and raised in Whistler, Beau grew up immersed in real estate and construction. His mother was one of the first brokers in the area, opening an office there in the early 1970s, while his father built homes and handled construction projects. That entrepreneurial Whistler spirit, hustle, community focus, and hands-on building shaped him early on. After university, Beau tried the tech world during the dot-com era but quickly returned home to become a real estate broker in Whistler, handling everything from multi-billion-dollar residential sales to commercial leases, industrial deals, and development land. That hands-on experience led him to Vancouver, where he joined Oni Group during one of its most prolific growth phases. Over nearly a decade there, Beau oversaw the delivery of thousands of housing units, plus vast amounts of office, industrial, and retail space in a high-energy, execution-driven environment. In 2013, Beau made the move to Wesgroup as a change agent. He came in as Senior VP of Development, helped reintegrate vertical services like in-house construction, rebuilt teams, and executed on a significant land bank during a period of corporate transition. He rose to President and CEO where his real strengths shine, setting the long-term strategic vision, building a high-autonomy culture with a top-tier executive team, inspiring people, and scaling the organization to handle a massive pipeline. Currently, dozens of active projects and millions of square feet in various stages across the Lower Mainland and beyond. And beyond running one of BC's major housing providers, Beau is a vocal advocate for fixing Canada's housing supply crisis. He testified before federal committees, written public letters to policymakers, launched the Homes Don't Just Happen educational series, and speaks openly about the real drivers behind unaffordability: regulatory complexity, excessive fees and taxes, and policy that overlooks the private sector's role in delivering 95% of our housing. He remains deeply connected to his roots, serving on Whistler's Housing Strategy Committee, the Whistler Development Corporation Board, and the Old School Initiative supporting local athletes and programs. Recognized as one of BC's most influential business leaders on the BIV BC 500 list, Beau brings a people-first, long-term perspective to development, balancing bold execution with community impact and relentless advocacy for better policy. Beau, thanks very much for joining me today on the Goodman Report podcast. I've been trying to get you on the show for a while. I know you're a busy guy, so you're in the hot seat now. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about Wesgroup, the scale and operations of the company you lead. We can talk about the housing crisis. I know you're very passionate about the BC budget and the implications. We can talk about policy and government relations. And if we have time, market conditions and the outlook for 2026. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. So before we start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born and raised, and how your career journey landed you as the CEO of Wesgroup?
Sure. I'll try and do the abridged version. So I was born and raised in Whistler, British Columbia. I'm one of about 5 kids in that year that were born in Whistler. It was a very different community than we know Whistler today. I think there was about 600 or 700 full-time residents. And my dad was moved there to run the Keg restaurant.
No kidding. The one in the village?
No, that was on Alta Lake.
Oh, over there.
Yeah, so the original Keg was on Alta Lake in Whistler, down in an area called Adventures West or Whistler K now. And so that was in, I guess, around 73. I was born in 74. And Along the way, they kind of were quite entrepreneurial. They bought a little ski hill called Rainbow Ski Village, which is between Alpine Meadows and Emerald Estates today, where the gas station is, the Rainbow gas station.
What's the Rainbow Strata Plaza now?
Yeah, the whole zone there.
Yeah.
There's an independent grocery store, and there's condos and employee housing and all kinds of stuff. So that was our ski hill, actually. And there was a restaurant there as well called Beau's Restaurant. And my mom helped to open the first real estate office in Whistler, in the back of Beau's Restaurant at Rainbow Ski Village. And my dad got into building spec houses, and, he built a few fourplexes and some really small subdivisions and things like that. He actually built quite a few spec homes. I was in the backseat of my mom's Volvo while she was showing real estate, or on one of my dad's kind of sites, laboring all my life. And, we grew up ski racing, and that was the only curriculum-based sport in Whistler. Went to university, wanted to not get into real estate, as hard as possible.
Yeah.
That didn't really work out, and I ended up going back home to Whistler after university and working with my mother.
Where did you study?
I studied commerce, and I finished my commerce degree. I went to a university in Montana on a ski racing scholarship for business. Transferred those credits to UVic, couldn't make it work in UVic, finished my Bachelor of Commerce at Royal Roads, and then moved back to Whistler and started working with my mother. And I wouldn't recommend that to many people. Well,
remember, I worked with my father for 17 years.
I actually think it's different working with your mother.
Perhaps.
Anyway, very close, very close. And so in Whistler at that time, in real estate, there was no commercial representation. And so Colliers International and CBRE and Cushman and Goodman, there was no companies like that doing commercial deals. So you were kind of a jack of all trades when you were a broker in Whistler. You did a deal on a ski chalet. You did a retail lease in the village. You did an industrial lease in Function Junction. You sold a farm in Pemberton, and you did development land. And so I had a listing for a townhouse site in Squamish. I think it was 58 units or so, if I recall. And it was a terrible market in the Sea to Sky corridor at that time. Just terrible, extremely soft. I hadn't generated a commission in almost 10 months.
So how old are you approximately?
I am about 29, around that. Hadn't generated a commission in 10 months, had a new baby. My wife and I got married quite young at 25 years old, right after university. We had a baby at 28 or 29. We're living in Pemberton. And I took out a second mortgage on our property to pay for the first, effectively. And we had this listing, and I remember I had my wife sleeping upstairs and a new baby upstairs, and I had all the plans out. And it was, 1 a.m. I had, all the information out on this listing I had. And I was going to Vancouver the next day to meet with David Evans at Cressy and Chris Evans at Ani. And I was just determined to go down and try and figure out how to sell this property. I went down the next day. I met with David at Cressy. They declined. It just wasn't up their alley. I met with Chris at Ani, and they ended up writing an offer. And they ended up moving forward with purchase. And in that process, they actually offered me a job. And I turned them down at first because I was still skiing every day, partially sponsored by Head Tyrolia a little bit. And I was coaching Dave Murray ski camps. And then I'd go into the office at noon. I'd kind of bring this joke out right at this time. It's probably why I hadn't generated a commission in 10 months. But life was good, right? And I really, skiing's everything to me. But my wife, she wasn't totally stoked with the arrangement. Pemberton at that time, it didn't have a community center. It didn't really have sidewalks. You know what I mean? And we only had one car, and I'd go to the office in Whistler. I'd ski, go to the office, come home, and she's with the baby carriage and the dog and the potholes and it's foggy in the winter there and pretty dreary. And she's just what? This is not what I signed up for. She's from the island. Anyway, so Ani made me a better offer, and Danielle never said anything, but I knew. I was okay, let's give this a whirl. And so we moved down to Vancouver. And
how did your mom feel about that?
She was happy. She thought it was a great opportunity. Okay. And I was probably driving her nuts as much as she was driving me nuts. And so Ani at that time, that was this crazy, prolific, wild place that was just, the delivery and the
Huge.
outcomes that were being generated there.
So is that like 2000 something?
2004,
Okay.
yeah, somewhere around there.
The market was just taking off
Market was
after a
taking off.
10-year
Yeah,
disappointing
totally.
run with
Absolutely.
the NDP.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just prolific. And we had a ton of autonomy, and everybody, I swear that like half the people were ex-pro or amateur athletes, and everybody was just going after it. And it was just incredible. We, being there at that time, we got a PhD in real estate development
For sure.
and finance and capital allocation and construction and da-da-da. And through university, I worked at a company called Whistler Excavations in the summers and time off. And so that was a company that put civil infrastructure in the ground in Whistler. I had a pretty big background in, brokerage, construction, civil. And I started there in acquisitions and development. Every site I acquired, I was the development manager. And then kind of moved up, and I ended up actually overseeing some operations that we had in Mexico for a short period of time, as well as opening a representative office in Vietnam.
Wow.
And I closed the office in the same year. And that was a big, interesting, crazy, it kind of gives you an inside window into sort of Ani, and they're just so open to trying new things and different opportunities. And, and so now they're bigger in the United States than they are even in Canada, right? They have this growth mode. And then came back from that, overseeing most of the development, if not all the development in Western Canada. And then I was on the board of UDI, and I was talking to Peter Wessick, who is the owner of Wesgroup.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of sort of change occurring at his organization. They were winding down a company called Park Lane Homes.
Yeah, I remember.
Which was one of the biggest home builders in Canada for a long time. His partner was kind of retiring, and they're winding that down and trying to bring everything under the umbrella of Wesgroup. And there's just a ton of change. And he kind of wanted to just go after it. He actually, and I think he would tell you this, is he admired Ani from afar. A lot of people were like, those guys are cowboys. They give our industry a bad name, all this kind of, and Peter was like, look at what these guys are doing.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, and he's a total contrarian. Anyway, so yeah, we just had lots and lots of conversations. I was kind of, at that time, I had always kind of given myself a limit at Ani. It was a very, high-paced place to work.
Sure.
And could you do it for any longer? I don't know. Maybe I'd thought about new opportunities and things. And I ended up joining Peter to help kind of be a change agent, bring a whole new operational kind of way to Wesgroup. And then market kind of kicked in again there too. So that was around 2013-ish. Yeah. And we went through a pretty robust moment there for about 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
And so we really timed that well and just started hammering it and brought all the teams in-house, construction, sales and marketing, interior design, because we were going through a major volume initiative. And it's just been, that's kind of how I got to Wesgroup and where I am now.
You entered as VP of development?
Senior VP of development, yeah. And then quickly, the company was kind of divided. And David Wessick, who now has Third Space, but he oversaw, he was obviously...
David is Peter's son, for those that don't know.
Yeah, and we'll get into, I guess, Wesgroup in a second here. But I oversaw the development, construction, customer care, interior design, sales and marketing, and David oversaw all the asset management, acquisitions, the portfolio, and then obviously he's a family member.
Yes.
And then David now has his own awesome company.
Yeah, I've sold him 2 development sites.
Yeah, they're doing very well. And David, oh my God, the guy's he's
great to deal with.
He's brilliant too. And he and I are close to this day. And now, so I've been overseeing the operations of Wesgroup since I think almost about 6 years now. And so Wesgroup, I can get into that and say what we are and who we are. And
I'd love to know, like, Wesgroup, how large is your organization? What are you guys building today? And where are you focusing your energy right now? And by the way, I remember I sold Wesgroup a site on 41st and Oak years ago. I don't know if you were at the helm then, right next to the gas station.
Well, so we bought the gas station, of course, and that site's under construction right now, a CMHC ACLP program.
Yeah. Did you guys get more density?
We did,
that?
yeah.
Okay. Was it deemed a unique site?
Kind of. So you had the JCC development, and then there's the other one that was Kitty Corner, and they were kind of
seniors home.
Yeah, and there was quite a lot of density. And so, it was natural for us to submit an application that had similar.
Good for you. Because at the time, it was a big price. And Good for you for renegotiating that.
Yeah, it worked out. Yeah. That's been a really great, and so grateful for CMHC and our partnership with
Yes,
CMHC
exactly.
because it's really helped us convert a lot of these projects that were originally meant to be condo projects
Right.
into purpose-built rental for our portfolio.
Very important. CMHC is a lifesaver for many.
And frankly speaking, and there's lots of criticism or whatever, but we have such a strong partnership with them, and we find them, notwithstanding their process and it's sometimes can be challenging. The people there are fantastic to work with. Yeah.
Anyways, we digressed.
Yes, we did.
I digress. Going back to what Wesgroup is, how many projects you have going, and where you're spending your time in
Sure.
the organization.
Okay, so Wesgroup is a family-owned private real estate development, asset management, capital allocation company. We are one of the largest privately held real estate development companies in Western Canada, perhaps even Canada, and I qualify private.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have any outside capital partners. We're internally financed, and our core objective always is to grow our income-producing asset portfolio. And we engage in merchant activity in order to grow the portfolio.
So selling condos, townhouses to finance your
and then we borrow out of the portfolio to buy merchant product to continue that cycle. Now that cycle's a little bit broken right now.
No
and we
kidding.
Can get into that.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So we're actually celebrating our 70th year this year. So Peter's family came over as immigrants from Estonia. They came over on a boat. They landed in Eastern Canada where Peter was born and then moved to the West Coast. His father, he was one of those, it's the same old story, right? With the Italian immigrants and
from the old country, $5 in your pocket.
Totally. Yeah. And all the immigrants that came, right? And hardworking, nothing to lose, builders. When I say builders, I don't mean physical, I mean builder mindset, right? And hardworking. And so his father kind of built the Vancouver Specials and maybe a couple of small apartment buildings. Peter was trained as a lawyer. And then he got into real estate and he really, grew the company and the portfolio, took a lot of risks. And he's also involved in things outside of real estate. We have an equipment company where we sell equipment. We have an interest in an oil and gas company in Alberta, and there's been all kinds of stuff. Real estate is the core. So privately owned, vertically integrated, we're involved in all asset classes. I like to say that we're frankly promiscuous in the market. We will get involved in anything. Our capabilities, I would argue, are second to none. And so we are vertically integrated to the extent that, obviously in-house development, but we're also in-house construction. So we're our own general contractor, property management, leasing, interior design, customer care, legal, finance, like just everything. And so we have a pipeline that could keep us building in Metro Vancouver alone probably for 25 years. Although the old strategy of collecting a land pipeline, I'm not so sure that's a good strategy anymore because the government has effectively extracted all of our equity out of our land with DCC increases and all that business. We can get into that. Yeah, we have, so we are engaged in industrial, commercial, retail, office, residential for sale, purpose-built rental. And right now, our active project list has shrunk significantly. In fact, so we were about 340 to 360 people up until about June last year, where we went through a round of workforce reduction. Unfortunately, it was deeply
I remember when you made that announcement and along with Rennie, it was, I think it sent a shock throughout the industry.
Yeah. And to be honest, we wanted that to happen and we wanted to do it in a very respectful way, but also kind of be public about it because it's, I think that we don't have anything to lose by being public about that type of thing. But we also wanted people to, in our public address, we said, we have some incredible talent here.
Well, that's right.
They all got hired.
Yeah. Good for you.
Even by outside industries. So that was fantastic. So we also canceled the project in 2025. That was the first time in my career. And the first time in Wesgroup's history. The point I'm making, though, is that you had asked about number of projects and sort of activity that we have going on. And so the number of projects that I would refer to as active have definitely shrunk. We've just sort of paused, right? Moving forward and being active on some of those projects because they're just not viable, no matter which way we kind of swing them. And so number of projects active right now, I actually don't know the number of exact projects. What I go by is from a construction perspective, we have about close to 2 billion under construction. And we seem to have averaged that number in and around that number for probably a good 7 years.
Are there any other companies at that scale that has about 2 billion?
Yeah, there's a few for sure. I mean, again, Ani and Anthem and Boza, I feel like they're all playing right in that realm, I would say, or certainly very capable from a resource and capability perspective to be in that realm. And so a lot of that is now CMHC finance projects that we converted from condo and really got heavy into what was the RCFI program, the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, and now is the ACLP program.
I can't keep track of all these new acronyms.
Yeah, I don't know why they changed it. It's almost the same program. And so, that's kind of the construction that we're carrying. Number of units under construction. This moves around a lot because we just completed a couple of projects, but we have close to about 2,000 units under construction currently. We just wrapped up some industrial for our portfolio, and that was close to 200,000 square feet-ish. And that was an interesting project. It was a 2-level industrial project with large bay warehouse on the main floor and small bay on the second floor with a ramp that trucks can drive up to. That ground floor is mostly leased now. The small bay we're struggling with a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of what we have going on right now, who we are, how I got into this role.
So what do you do? Like, is your day very similar with meetings, or is every day different? And where are you spending your energy? Are you managing people? Are you looking at pro formas? Are you on site? Like, if you had to carve out what you do in a day, what does it look like?
Well, I have an incredible executive team. Like, my executive team are rock stars. And so, I really lean heavily into my executive team to help oversee the day-to-day operations of the organization as well as the mid to long-term strategy. I focus heavily on the development of that team. So leadership development. And really, we run our team in quite a unique way in what I would refer to as a forum style. And we refer to ourselves as team number one. We use the analogy of co-parenting a child. So when we show up, we are there to be co-parents of a child. The child is the organization. And so we're not showing up with any one hat on. We're showing up to, work on what is in the best interest of the organization. And we're extremely aligned. The other thing that I would refer to myself as is an alignment generator. Oftentimes when we see things, sort of start to decay, spiral, fall apart within an organization or even at the project level, it's always because of a lack of alignment. Whether it's a lack of alignment on the mission itself, whether there's a lack of alignment on the tools that we are using to accomplish the mission, lack of alignment on our values as an organization. It could be any one of those things. And so I spend a significant amount of time generating alignment within the organization. And what does that look like? It looks like me walking around
seeing where the roadblocks are
and talking to people and making sure that, are we on the same page? Are we on the same page? And we have a high level of autonomy in our organization because we have a high level of alignment. And there's sort of this mutual trust that is, I call it the mutual trust bridge between alignment and autonomy. And so people also can speak up in the organization. We're very, very transparent with our information and what we're doing. And people in our organization have a voice. So when I'm walking around asking questions, people are not afraid to answer. And, we can get to the bottom of whether there is misalignment in the organization pretty quick, and we can address it. So leadership development of my team. So we have the executive leadership team and we have the strategic leadership team, which is a team that we built in our effort to scale, which kind of has been delayed. But we're still working on this structure. I spend a lot of time with them as well, developing that leadership team and generating alignment. And then, I also spend, as we've discussed at the beginning of this or maybe perhaps before we were recording, but I spend a significant amount of time on government advocacy.
Yes, which we're going to talk about.
A significant amount of time.
What's amazing is having talked to other leaders in development and construction, there's all these different organizations that have similar output, but have a totally different leadership style or organizational style. And I always find it fascinating as someone who runs a real estate company to see how you're running your team versus other leaders are running their team. And they're very different. So I admire your role, and it seems to me that you're really getting down to making sure that there's synergies and the correct environment to produce really good outcomes and managing people. And I like that idea of alignment very much. I wanted to pivot now and talk about something that you've been very passionate about and talking about is the housing crisis. And over the years, you've been very clear that what we have is a supply crisis or a cost of delivery crisis. It's not speculation or a hoarding issue. You've called out ideas like a vacant land tax as asinine, giving floating rate land loans that spiked 400%. We have insolvencies that are still elevated. There are reports that are 60 or more distressed sites equaling over 10,000 potential units for sale. You've said taxes, DCCs, CACs, and levies now make up roughly 30% of new housing costs, with government often earning 3 times what the private sector does on a project. So, Beau, are we still better off in a GIC or like what's going on?
Well, this is going to be a long conversation now.
Well, we got time.
Okay. So the answer is, I would say right now, unfortunately, in many respects, we are better to deploy our capital into a GIC. It's interesting. I was just having this I just had lunch with a mayor of a municipality, and we were having a very similar conversation. And why is it so hard? Why is there a cost of delivery? What's going on? And I said to him, well, down at River District, about 5 to 6 years ago, I guess it's 7 years ago, we were selling condos, brand new condos for $587 a square foot. And we were making a 17% return on cost. And I would die for that today. Today, we need to sell condos even to make any margin at about $11.50 a square foot. And honestly, those are single digit return on cost.
And that's not really happening right now.
And it's not even happening right now. And so you think about that for a second. So we were all making money and doing our thing at $587 a square foot. And now we need to sell at $11.50, and that's down. We can get into downtown we need to sell stuff in downtown on the peninsula for $2,800 a square foot to make it a margin. And so all of that is cost. So what is that cost? Where did that cost come from? And we break it down. It's been a death by 1,000 cuts, right? We have all these different crises. We have climate, we have social justice issues, we have First Nation stuff, and it's all being put on the backs of housing delivery, right? And so what does that look like? Well, our building code, right? We have used our building code, which is traditionally meant for life safety, but we've used it to address climate, GHG emissions, energy reduction. We've used it to address some, call it social issues. So I go to the accessibility requirements that have been put into the building code. And all of these things have increased significantly the cost of delivering housing. In the last 7 years alone, I estimate that building code changes have increased hard costs by 10%. And so then we have fees, levies, and charges by various levels of government. And this has been like the Wild West. I had one senior level government official, I won't say who it is, but he said, it's like it's the gold rush. Someone is firing a starting gun and we're all running out there to stake our claim before the rules change. And what he was describing is sort of all these different municipalities and a regional government that are all trying to figure out, they're all talking about this mantra of growth paying for growth. And we can talk about that in a second. And they're just saying, we have all this infrastructure that we need to build, and it's going to cost this much, and therefore we need to capture this much money from new housing that is the cause of these infrastructure needs. And in some, like this Metro Vancouver, for example, I think it's from 2000, I might get these dates wrong, but from 2017 to 2027, their fees will have gone up 1,943%.
That is insane.
Well, and inflation didn't go up 1,943% in that same time period, right? And so, and then the issue is back to the Wild West and the starting gun and everybody running to stake their claim. Metro Vancouver's doing that. Coquitlam's doing that. Port Coquitlam, Langley, Vancouver, White Rock. You know what I mean? Like they're all doing it without talking to one another. There's no coordinated approach. There's no like impact assessment on the delivery of housing in British Columbia or Canada. And so here we are now, when you total fees, levies, and taxes by all levels of government, including the federal government, they get their pound of flesh in GST, right? And GST is charged on all the other taxes. We have a huge double taxation problem in housing. So if you want to call DCCs and CACs a form of tax or levy, and they are, that's embedded in the pro forma.
And then that's being taxed.
And we have property transfer tax, and we have da-da-da-da, and that's all being taxed by the federal government. And so housing is taxed as if it's a sin, right? It's like cigarettes, alcohol. We tax, the paradox of it is we tax cigarettes and alcohol to prevent people from doing it.
That's right.
And we're taxing housing as much or more than those types of taxes. What do you think is going to happen? It's going to stop.
You said on a previous podcast that municipalities are drunk on DCCs. And the party's run out. The party's over now.
The party's over. The golden goose has been strangled.
But do you think it's because they've mismanaged their budget so much that they just keep going after this gravy train that has basically come to an end?
I think there's a lot of that. I do think I think all of our governments right now have a spending problem. And I think that it's actually quite amazing to me the level of tolerance as a constituency that we have developed for this spending issue. And I can't recall a time. I mean, I haven't been alive as long as some people and for political cycles, et cetera, but I can't recall a time where we have this level of tolerance has persisted, right? You look at the federal government and these structural deficits. You look at the provincial government, structural deficits. Municipal spending and Business Council of British Columbia has done a great job reporting on municipal spending and how it's gone up on a per person basis and the impact on property taxes, et cetera. Municipal spending is out of control.
Well, we're totally broke right now.
We're totally broke. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And public sector, I think it was Wendy Waters who published something, or perhaps she reposted it on LinkedIn the other day. And I've seen this chart floating around. I think it's a StatsCan chart that shows government sector growth. I think it's public sector job growth. I think it's from 2014. In British Columbia, it was, I think, 83% public sector. And British Columbia as a whole, since 2014, was 27%. In British Columbia, for every 1,000 people of population, we have 9 public sector workers. In Alberta, that has a similar population.
5 or 6.
5 or 6.
That's right. I heard that.
And sure, maybe we have BC Ferries, some Crown Corporation, ICBC. I don't know. But we are clearly engaged in this, what I would refer to as reckless spending. And where's the money go? Right? And so you asked, back to municipalities being drunk on DCCs. Yes. Absolutely. Because they are overspending. The other thing that's going on is this is a conversation that is yet to be had. And it's a conversation about infrastructure and infrastructure requirements. And local governments say, in order to maintain our existing infrastructure, as well as develop new infrastructure that is robust and long-lasting to accommodate the growth and the needs of our society and here in Metro Vancouver or whatever, we need this and it's going to cost that. Have we verified those costs in any way? Have we peeled back the layers of the sewage pump station requirements? What are the engineering requirements? Are they greater than most international standards? Are they lower? Are they the same? Nobody's asking these questions. And I have so many questions about that because I used to work putting infrastructure in the ground. And, we have to have that conversation. It is very germane to spending.
Who are you talking to? Are you talking to the municipalities, the provincial government, the federal? Because they're not talking to each other.
No, they're not talking to each other.
They're off in their own silos.
Yeah. I think if we go with Metro Vancouver for a second, and because I like to pick on them right now, and they deserve it. They came out and said we need, $37 billion of new infrastructure growth should pay for growth, and that's how it should be. And of course, the board's made up of elected officials from other jurisdictions who definitely don't want to raise property taxes for their constituents in their jurisdiction. So they're over in Metro Vancouver on this board, and they're like, let's jack up the fees over here.
Sure.
It's a terrible system. But they have these infrastructure requirements, and there's no audit of those requirements. There's no audit of what engineering standards they're using. And in no way, to be clear, am I saying that there is anything nefarious or malicious happening. It's bureaucracy and an apparatus. That's just what happens.
It's almost like we need an Elon Musk style Doge here
We do.
in Vancouver and BC to like really zero down and hold people accountable.
We totally do. And, I remember when, Doge was implemented after Trump was inaugurated. And I thought, what a great idea.
So
I
did
really did. And I said, we could
Politics
use that.
aside.
Forget about the politics and all the nana boo-boo that they were doing about it. Like, I wish they didn't do that, right? Because they effectively diluted the really important work that needed to be done with government spending. Right. And so in Canada and in British Columbia and at our municipal level, we could absolutely use a third party, verification, review, audit of all of this stuff, of budgets, of spending.
So your next YouTube video, Beau, I think you should bring that up.
Well, our next one's on rent control.
Oh, okay. I like that.
I like that. Yeah.
Amazing.
So yes, drunk on DCCs, not a revenue problem, a spending problem. And we have to ask ourselves where our tolerance for this behavior is coming from.
This is really, really enlightening stuff. And a lot of the laymen don't understand why. There's this narrative that's still out there. The greedy developer, it's their fault we have this affordability crisis. I mean, give me a break. You've been outspoken. UDI has been also very outspoken and public with the issues that we have. They're very sound arguments. We have a lot of smart people, but it doesn't seem to be changing, or at least not changing fast enough, which leads me to, we could talk about policy and government relations, because I know that you have spent, as you've said, a huge portion of your time on government advocacy, writing letters, pushing back on bad policy. You blew up on social media, on LinkedIn, with over 100,000 impressions for some of your posts. And you've launched the Homes Don't Just Happen YouTube series and openly called out policy failures. You've noted Canada's poor ranking on regulatory speed for permits. And so I'm curious, if you could wave a magic wand and fix these issues, where would you start, and what areas would you attack to start relieving some of the pressure we have in the housing industry?
These are foundational issues. I am deeply, deeply concerned about Canada as a nation. I'm deeply concerned about our province. And we have, I think, tall poppy syndrome in Canada and British Columbia.
Tall poppy
syndrome. And that is when one poppy starts to grow taller than the rest of the poppies, we chop it down.
Right.
That's not fair. That's not equitable, right? And, we want to tell people who take risk and innovate when they achieve something or are rewarded for it, we want to call that lucky or fortunate. We don't want to acknowledge the work, the effort, the risk that was perhaps and most often, in fact, taken to achieve that outcome. And we've lost our way in this sense. And so the reason I'm kind of going down this path is because I think the issues are foundational. I think that, and this is probably part of the reason that we've developed this level of tolerance for just government spending and redistribution, right? This concept of redistribution. And so I think that we really, really need to understand. So now let's talk about capital within the context of what I just said. So we want to attract capital, right? We want to attract capital for housing. CMHC and RBC have suggested that in order to even come close to building enough housing to return to some level of affordability, we need, call it $1 to $2 trillion. That capital is not available domestically. We have to attract that capital.
Even if we had the capital, good luck building the homes.
Totally.
That we need.
And so, we have to we're trying to attract capital into nation building projects for energy. We're trying to attract capital into housing. And so we have to be investable. The environment we create needs to be one of certainty and one that understands and acknowledges that there is a required risk-adjusted return for capital. And not only that, I'm going to go as far as to say we need to celebrate that. We need to learn to celebrate when someone or a group of people or an organization engages in risk-taking and innovation. There's a reward that is risk-adjusted that comes with that. And when it happens, we need to put a poster of those people, that person, up on our wall.
Because most likely, those people that succeed have lost 10 times before that and failed And it's interesting, all the leaders that I've spoken to who have taken risks have told me stories of losing it all, getting hurt, and having to rebuild over and over and over again.
One of my favorite sayings is an expert has failed more than a beginner has ever
Exactly.
tried.
Yeah.
And so I think that we're kind of, talking in an existential way here, but so we talked about the foundation of what I believe our sort of philosophy is right now, or our ideology in Canada and in our province. Yet we want to attract all this capital. We want it to be invested here, but we don't want to recognize that it requires a return. We don't want to understand that capital is like water. It's just going to flow.
Path of least
resistance. And we're not yet understanding that investment requires certainty. As soon as you introduce uncertainty, it's like a major ripple in the system.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I always go back to, this was the worst. I was so upset with our government when they did this. This was the BC provincial Liberals. They're the ones who put into place the foreign buyer tax. And there was a lot of political pressure at the time to do that, understandably. They instituted it, implemented it, and they made it retroactive.
That is so unfair.
And what message does that send to someone who is thinking about putting an investment in Canada? It doesn't matter that specific policy was related to housing.
They should have given a 6-month lead time.
Well, sure. But at the very least, don't make it retroactive. Like, so all those people that had bought a pre-sale condominium, following the rules, if they didn't have their permanent resident or whatever, they were now subject to a tax. And it was a significant tax. And the signal no one would have questioned if the government said we're putting in place a foreign buyers tax, and that's all they said. No one would have questioned. No one would have come to them and said, you should make that retroactive.
Right. Yeah.
Like, who would have said that?
Yeah, that's insane.
Right. And so, but the point I'm making is that when we do things like that, that generates uncertainty.
It was like in New Westminster when the municipality downzoned market strata and took away their ability to sell off the units.
Yeah.
I mean, meanwhile, these owners have been paying these high fees, high taxes, and literally expropriated landowners' rights. So I agree with you 100% in our business uncertainty. And then, of course, the Cowichan decision, there's so much confusion, uncertainty now that we can talk about fee simple rights and how that's really derailed. Like when that decision came out, my phone stopped ringing for 2 weeks. I had a landowner call me. I sold him an apartment building for $50 million years ago. He had $40 million on debt, and he couldn't refinance because of this decision. So when people are like, oh, no, it's not going to affect land use rights, blah, 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 it is having a dramatic effect on the market, which is really frustrating. And then on top of that, knowing everything that we know about the challenges we're experiencing, the BC budget comes out. What do you think of, I call him Comrade EB right now, Comrade EB and his band of pirates. Like, honestly, it was stupid. What they did was stupid. They doubled down on their failed policies, and now they're taxing the very industry that is barely hanging on. PST, GST, school tax, this, that. Give me a break.
Yeah. So you just touched on two things there within the context of uncertainty. So there's the Cowichan decision and I guess UNDRIP and the legislation DRIPA, and then the BC budget. And so I agree that the Cowichan decision and the subsequent, I think it's referred to as the Gitgatla decision, and that was an appeals court decision. They have created a significant amount of uncertainty, as well as, frankly speaking, canceled growth. Right, Montrose Properties, which is one of the property owners that was ring fenced in that decision area, they had their construction financing pulled from them. They were about to build 200,000 square foot Class A. I'm maybe getting some of these numbers. I'm pretty sure I'm generally accurate. A 200,000 square foot Class A warehouse, and they had a tenant, I believe an investment grade tenant, and they have other portfolio buildings in that area with, like I think Costco and Coca-Cola and things like large investment grade tenants. And it all fell apart directly as a result of that decision. And so we can argue about, I guess, the technical legal merits of the ruling, but the damage is done. The ruling itself almost is moot, right? Now, notwithstanding, I do get a little bit frustrated with this the whole situation's unfortunate, right? Because now we are becoming increasingly divided at a time when we need to be more united as a society. We are becoming increasingly polarized against reconciliation. And I think that's very unfortunate. And I can explain that in a little bit more detail. I believe it's paragraph 3551 of the Cowichan ruling that refers to, I believe it's, and the listeners may need to verify this, I believe it refers to section 23 and 25 of the Land Title Act. And it says that if Aboriginal title is granted, it supersedes those sections of the Land Title Act. And those sections are what make our title indefeasible.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have the part where deals are falling apart just because of the uncertainty, regardless of paragraph 3551. But then in that paragraph, it is virtually indisputable in terms of what it says.
That's right.
And so for those that are, there's misinformation and fear-mongering, I think there probably is a little bit of that, and that's this polarization piece. But at the end of the day, that's what the case said. That's what the ruling said.
What's amazing is you have lawyers on either side that are very accomplished arguing against each other. Meanwhile, we're at the tip of the spear watching deals fall apart.
Yeah. And I think it's really, back to the why I think it's, so I was, as I said at the beginning, I'm born and raised in Whistler and Pemberton. So we had to go to high school in Pemberton. There's no high school in Whistler. And I would say close to 50%, maybe 40% of the population of the high school is First Nations, mostly from the Mount Currie Indian Reservation, which was nearby. And I was on sports team. We were on sports teams together. I had sleepovers on the reservation with friends. And I saw what I now understand to be, some pretty crazy stuff, right? Due to generational trauma and things like that. So my 5 kids have Métis citizenship. I have to clarify there because they're a long way from being marginalized anyway. But the reason I bring that up is because the journey to get that citizenship is quite robust, and you have to create pedigree charts, and you go through like generations of history. And it was incredibly fascinating. Our family actually, it's on my wife's side, actually has some really, really interesting history. And then, we've gone through rounds of Indigenous awareness training at Wesgroup. I have a book by Bob Joseph on my desk, and there's a letter from a principal of a residential school that is, I think it was 1948. This principal is sending a letter home to parents of Indigenous kids saying, you should be grateful that we're letting your kids come home for Christmas. And, if you don't get them back on time, we may not let them come home next year for Christmas. And I have 5 kids, and I don't know that principal would still be alive if I received that letter, frankly, or I'd be in jail.
Yeah, one or the other.
Yeah. And so I say all of this to say that I fundamentally support reconciliation in British Columbia and Canada, and in particular, economic reconciliation. We have to acknowledge that there's this stuff that occurred in the past, and we have to figure out how we're going to bring a lot of these nations right out of poverty, right? Like we focus in on, some of the nations that are here locally. And, I don't know that I would refer to that as poverty, but you drive around BC and even northern BC, et cetera. And it's very, very
pretty rough.
It's pretty rough.
Yeah.
And so the point I'm making is that I'm really, really disappointed in terms of how reconciliation has been implemented in our province specifically.
They weaponized it.
It's a disaster.
They weaponized it instead of trying to bring people together. I don't think anybody disagrees with what you just said. It was the implementation of it, and it's created more polarization. And now it's devastated the real estate industry.
Well, and it's extremely divisive, right? Like why, and I've said this publicly already, is there was an MLA that stood up in the legislature and said that anybody who's non-Indigenous should refer to themselves as settlers, uninvited guests. And that rattles me because that is divisive and polarizing. And I can't understand what is with this fascination with identity politics. And I will never identify as a settler or an uninvited guest. I am a British Columbian. I am a Canadian.
Hear, hear.
And I am a father and I'm a husband. And we need to unite. We don't need to divide. And so all of this is polarizing the constituency against reconciliation. So that's a whole issue. And it's an issue that's impacting our economy. It's making BC more uninvestable. at a time when we need to grow our economy like mad, right? So BC budget, flipping over to that, extremely disappointed. What are we doing? Again, we do not have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. This government has grown the public sector by astronomical amounts as compared to private sector growth. And to come out and to double down and to increase taxes when we're already one of the most taxed jurisdictions perhaps in the world, to come and to do that, like, what signal are you setting? This is a fail.
It is
a fail.
It is
an F plus.
It is so bad, Beau. And it's like when that budget came out, I think people were stunned. Like, did we actually do this? Like, it's not, I don't even know why we're calling it a budget. Like, what is that? And who came up with that? Who's leading that?
I've actually, in the last year, I haven't engaged too much with the province, with our current government in the province of British Columbia. I focus more of my engagement federally because to be honest, and I've said publicly and on other podcasts and things like that, I've met with EB. He and I had a Christmas beer a few years back. He's a fantastic guy to have a beer with. He is highly intelligent. Do I agree with, at that time, when I would consider the NDP government to be a little bit more moderate coming out of the John Horgan era, did I agree even at that time with a lot of the policies? No, absolutely not. But today, it's like we spiraled. We're in like a death spiral in this province. And I can't engage with the provincial government right now. We're so at odds in our beliefs, it seems like, and our ideas of what needs to truly be done in this province, and at odds with how bad we believe it is. Because I believe it's really, really bad to the extent that it's structural. Like, we have a structural problem in British Columbia. And when you think about that, like a foundation in a home or a building, when you have a problem that requires structural repairs, that's some heavy shit.
So it's very clear, Beau, we need new leadership. And that's the problem, because I have never seen sentiment this bad before. And it's this ripple effect, whether you're a mortgage broker, or lender, or builder, or accountant, or realtor. Like, we're all part of this ecosystem of real estate, which is one of the biggest industries in our province, and it's affecting all of us. Like, I can't tell you how many discussions I have. I feel like a therapist at work. Developers calling, you wouldn't believe I got to this meeting at City Hall, or I spoke to this planner and this counselor, and I spoke to they don't get it. And meanwhile, you're putting out great content. We have great advocacy groups, very intelligent people, breaking it down, being very vocal, being respectful of the province at the same time, trying to not polarize things. And it doesn't seem like it's changing. So the structural issue that you speak of, I really hope that people vote EB out, because it's that simple right now. That's really how we're going to make structural change.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need a change in government.
Because if you ask people, are we better off today? Are things good? No. People are suffering economically. We're polarized, and it's like rage bait all the time.
100%. So, yeah, we're in a bad space.
Well, let's try to talk about something positive. Whew, boy, I wanted to touch upon a few other things. When the government starts talking about the starts, the statistics come out. One of the things that I really liked that you were clarifying is, what is a housing start? So CMHC puts out and the government puts out, actually, no, things are good. Look at all the starts. And then you said, well, let's talk about what a start is. A start is when they pour the foundation. That business decision was made years ago.
Start is when a foundation reaches grade.
Right. So talk about a lagging indicator. When I see sales go through now, and as a realtor, and I'm advising a client, and I'm on a development site or whatever, and we have comparable sales, particularly in land, and they close, and we get the number, and I'm demonstrating to a client who wants to sell a site, this is what it is per buildable square foot. But then I have to have a caveat, just so you know, that deal went firm 3 years earlier, and took time to close with extension after extension or a year earlier. Now we're in a different environment. It makes it difficult to price property because of this lag time. But you would think the government would be a little bit more straightforward when they're talking about the current starts that we have and not to use this failed, nonsensical way of showcasing actually what we're building today or how many starts we've had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the start data is actually, it's a really big issue. I actually, I want to pat ourselves on the back at Wesgroup because I actually think that we kind of outed it. No one knew. No one had really dug into what a start is and this idea of how lagging it was. There was some light discussion about it, I recall, a year or 2 years ago, but it didn't matter, right? So when we were engaging in pre-sales of a condominium project, we typically sold the project out in many cases before construction started, or certainly before we completed the project, right? But when that changed, when things really started to slow down and soften, when we were starting to hold standing inventory, I say we as an industry, right? We weren't selling out projects. We now have standing inventory. Costs are rising really rapidly. Interest rates going up, all this different stuff that is happening at the same time. And then it's like, well, starts are softening. Like we're not breaking ground on projects as quickly. And then, CMHC starts are up. And it's like, well, what this doesn't make sense. And so let's dig into this a little bit. What is a start? A start is when a foundation reaches grade. Okay. What does that mean exactly? Literally when a foundation reaches grade. So on a large multifamily project, like we had we used this in an example on LinkedIn post. It's now like Benjamin Tal just used it in a CIBC release. Mike Moffat of the Missing Middle Initiative used these photographs. So it's of a project in New Westminster. There's a large project. It was 260 units residential on top of 100,000 square foot office podium. And, there's probably took us close to 2 years, not totally, to start excavation, go to the bottom of the hole and start forming back out of the hole, shoring and forming. And so they counted it as a start like almost 2 years after we started. And if you think about it, the investment decision was made 6 or 8 months before the excavator walked on the start. And so now that's 2.5 years ago from today. Let's just say today was the start. It was actually last June or so. So 2.5 years from last June, that's 3 years from today or just more. Think about the economic conditions at that time compared to today and our decision-making framework at that time. And now we estimate that CMHC is off by about 30 to 35% in Metro Vancouver alone, which is about 5,000 to 6,000 units, which is also about close to $3 billion in activity. And this feeds into GDP forecasting.
Right. So they're using these fictitious numbers to develop policy in their budget.
Well, that's the other issue. So politicians and policymakers, they don't understand this. The bank economists themselves. So I've been going after the bank economists. When they come out, TD just came out and made a statement. I think the statement was along the lines of, housing starts are one of the most robust reportings post-World War II. That is the most inaccurate statement of what housing starts are across Canada right now that you could come across. And I went right at them. And I've been going to RBC. I've been going to CIBC.
And how do they respond to you?
Benjamin Tal is all over it. He's writing about it now. RBC is great. Like they're trying. TD, they're still arguing. I'm like, what are we arguing about? I was just in Ottawa at the Ministry of Finance in front of 20 people from the Ministry of Finance explaining why your statement is wrong. So there's nothing to argue about here.
Yeah.
And the point is that policymakers and politicians will come out and they'll repeat those statements. And when we show up there saying the situation is extremely dire, we need a policy intervention in a positive way, or we need you to repeal some of your intervening policies from the past that have caused this, they say, well, what's the urgency? Starts are quite robust. In fact, according to TD, some of the best starts we've had since World War II.
So when do you think that they realize that they fucked up? When Wesgroup starts announcing layoffs, when do you think the light bulb, or has it gone off?
We were in Ottawa shortly after. So I also founded something that was bothering me is there's all these different groups and associations kind of jockeying for position to advocate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of like, we need to get some of the largest home builders together and in a room and find alignment and be consulting with government. And so we formed the Canadian Home Builders Alliance. And it's like 8 of the largest developers from across Canada.
Are you able to say who's part of this alliance?
It's ourselves, Wesgroup, Polygon.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted like Canadian, and
Sure.
there's other developers that could easily have like, anybody, like we just wanted to.
Yeah.
So it's Polygon and Wesgroup from West Coast, Kentaro from Alberta, Minto, Mattamy, and Tricon from Ontario, and Broccolini from Quebec. And so it's been very successful in terms of being able to go to Ottawa and have large meetings with like all-day meetings with the significant number of bureaucrats. And so we went there and we've been talking about this with them. And when we went there shortly after we did our layoffs, and it was alarming for them. That was your question. But it was still like, there's still, housing starts,
Yeah.
And so I would say right now, they're starting to like, there's something off here. And at the end of the day, this data is lagging, but it's still going to come to be, right? So we're trying to convince them now there's a problem, but whether it's in 6 months from now or 12 months from now, there's going to be no starts, even by CMHC's definition. And so I think right now they're seeing this.
And what do you think would be the appropriate measure to use so people actually understood what the current state of the union was, for lack of better words? Like, what is happening today? What do you use? When is that investment decision made, perhaps?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of indicators.
DP?
Well, I think so. Our industry has to be more transparent with pre-sale numbers on the condo side. That's one thing. I also think that, and we're talking to CMHC about this. I said this earlier, that CMHC is actually, they're great to work with. Like, they are super responsive. They acknowledge this is an issue. They've tried to put out press releases and guidance documents on what a start is. They've tried to share that with government officials. The chief economist at CMHC has done podcasts on this. They're trying, they acknowledge it's an issue. They don't want to change the definition because of all of the backward.
The historical. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is adding a new definition to go along with it, and that is an excavation permit, perhaps. So it's when the excavator walks on site. One of the reasons they've been reluctant in the past to have an excavation permit be a data point, is because oftentimes you think of Atmosphere in Richmond as a giant hole in the ground, and there's like 1,000 units there. And it's done, right? For now, anyway. Done as in it's not moving forward. And so they'll claim that as, we measure when the foundation gets to grade because they're committed, it's happening, et cetera. But we think excavation start. The other thing is the pre-sale on the condo side, so on the merchant side. So, pre-sales they're a canary in the coal mine for housing starts, for sure. We've certainly seen a lot of condo projects convert to rental, and so that saved starts. But as you well know, that's getting iffy right now, right? The rental market is softening, I would say, to the extent that capital is questioning whether now is the right time to deploy into new purpose-built rental. Pre-sales, this is what we've also been conveying to anybody who will listen. So in Metro Vancouver, the 10-year average is about 15,600 units in pre-sales, and that's across all product types, high-rise, low-rise, townhome. And in 2025, there were around, and Rennie does a great job of tracking this. In 2025, there were around 6,000 sales that they count as pre-sale, but this is the nuance. 2,000 of those were standing inventory. So you can't, that's not pre-sale.
Before.
That's committed. That's done. It's there. 2,000 were under construction. Can't talk about that. That's committed. It's got a construction loan. 2,000 pre-sales that are in a sales center still, and the project has not started. And that's from a 10-year average of 15,600. And I think the high point was 2021, and it was around 25,000. So we are in 2025, 2,000 pre-sales, and we don't even know which of those, if any, will qualify for their pre-sale tests for construction.
What we're doing right now? We're talking to a bunch of developers who have, say, 100-unit market condo buildings. They've pre-sold 30%. They're stuck with 70%. And you're going to see coming out of our office in the next couple of months, bulk sales packages to help relieve some of the pressure.
Yeah.
And there's some big players that are going to be swooping in, buying distressed condos that are sitting empty, just sitting there. I think in the residential market, this has been the slowest period for transactions in 20 years.
Yeah.
So let's just say things get better. I mean, how long we have a structural problem, as you've said. So when do you see things like, let's forecast? What do you see the balance of this year, 2026? When do you think things will get better? In other words, when will confidence come back? When will we see more liquidity in the market, capital coming, and a general sense of opportunity and excitement? I used to be excited to come to work. It used to be fun to do deals.
Yeah.
Now it's just like I feel like a therapist talking to people. My day is filled with horror stories of people going bankrupt, deals not penciling, collapsed deals, brokers going broke. I mean, it is a tough time. And I think, okay, well, I spoke to my father. He sold real estate for almost 50 years. He walked me through the early 80s. He walked me through the 90s.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, there's a bloodletting going on right
Yeah.
now, and it could be several more years. We're all hoping for this V-shaped recovery, but I don't see a bouncing back anytime soon. Like, what's your sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think, so first of all, we'll compartmentalize this to housing, I guess, right? Because there's obviously the other asset classes and other sort of subsectors of real estate. And for example, retail is extremely robust right now. So on the residential side and everything you just described, I agree with, right? I think that list of court-ordered foreclosure sales that we watch and carry is well over 70 now, and I think it actually totals close to 16,000 potential units. The Federal Bureau of Bankruptcy, I think it's called, reported well over 240 real estate-related insolvencies, I think that was Q2 or Q3 2025. So there's like some structural issues in real estate, in particular on the residential side. When will it turn around? What will it take? It's hard to say, right? Like, I think we have a capital problem, like we said. There was an article recently that came out and I can't remember, unfortunately, to reference it, but there's about $30 billion domestically trapped in gated real estate funds. So let's just say for a second that all of that capital is repatriated in some way, even if there's no return. I don't think that capital is going back into real estate, right? So we need to figure out drawing capital back into real estate. The banks are there for the groups like ourselves, and they'll be there if there's viable projects. But we got to get back to viability, and we'd be remiss if we're not talking about immigration. By the way,
and what about allowing foreign money to invest in real
100%.
estate here?
These are two very, very important components. So let's talk about immigration for 1 second here. And I think that obviously immigration played a significant role in sort of the run-up of the cost of shelter, let's just say. And it was such a weird thing, right? Like, we had an immigration program in Canada that was referred to as the envy of the world in terms of immigration programs for decades. And we had widespread support across the constituency in Canada for immigration. Like, it was across party lines. And they flipped just like that when all of a sudden it was like, we're letting 1 million people in a year. And it just went wild. We didn't think about infrastructure. We didn't think about hospitals and schools and healthcare and all that kind of stuff. And so now we've turned that tap off because it became a political issue.
Yeah.
And so, now we are seeing the result of that tap turning off, with vacancy rates going higher, rents coming down, all this kind of stuff, it's good for affordability, but then it's bad for investment, right? This is the whole thing. Housing is an ecosystem, and we have to figure out a way to create sustainable and stable housing production across the country. It can't always be like this.
It's this pendulum that's swinging from one extreme side to another. And it's like whiplash every few years.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that immigration will turn back on because we're not making too many babies in this country, and we need to grow our population, and people are retiring out of the workforce, et cetera, et cetera. And so when immigration turns back on, and hopefully it is a program that was similar to how it was that when we were referred to as the NB, that will cause household formation. And household formation will create demand, and demand will create viable projects. And we need to bring down the cost of delivery as well, right? We have to kind of shrink that. We got to stop taxing housing. And so we find viability, whether it's purpose-built rental or for sale housing. And I think there's going to be fewer, more capable and professional players on the playing field.
So
And
it's like the big get bigger because
I
unless you
think
have
so.
staying power, you can't make it.
I think so. And, I want to say, and perhaps it's a controversial statement, but I'm glad. We are now operating in one of the most complex delivery systems, I argue, in the world. And someone from New York, I always think of that book, High Rise. Someone from New York might say, no way. But like the layers of complexity and policy that we've put on housing delivery. You mentioned my statement publicly about OECD nations and
Yes.
regulatory framework. And I believe we're 36 out of 37 on that list.
Can you just give the audience a little bit just so they understand?
Yeah, so the OECD is I think it's 37 nations and it's developed nations and they share data and we compare ourselves against one another. So, foreign direct investment, regulatory framework, et cetera. And we are, if not dead last, second to dead last on regulatory framework in Canada, effectively issuing a permit or a business license. And so we need to change that. But where I was going when I said, good that there's only these strong players left on the playing field, there was a lot of people. Real estate was really, really en vogue, right? A lot of foreign capital, syndicated capital was landing in Metro Vancouver, overpaying for dirt and real estate, inflating the value of land and assets. They did not understand the complexities and the framework in which we operate locally here. And I think it caused a lot of problems.
Well, it caused a lot of damage because these people were riding high. You didn't even really need to know what you were doing. As long as you bought land or you bought an investment and you had a sort of capable operator, you would do okay because time would wash away your mistakes. The market, it was a 20-year party. From the early 2000s to about 2023, you could mess up, you could overpay, you could mismanage your property, but it was okay because everything was going up. There was this rampant speculation, and you could point to different reasons why. But then all of a sudden, fundamentals became important. Highly leveraged people got hurt. And so now I think the point that you're trying to make is we need to have mature operators that stick to fundamentals and don't mess up the market.
Yeah, it's not only on a transactional level. It's also, well, I guess, when you're negotiating with a jurisdiction, a regulatory body like a municipality or whatever, that could be transactional as well. But that's also where we saw a lot of mess, right? So we would go into a city or a jurisdiction and we'd say, here's what we're trying to do. And, make an application, a large rezoning application, change of entitlement, change of use, whatever it is. And, we were negotiating for offsite infrastructure, community amenities, et cetera. And the city or municipality would demand of us X, Y, and Z. And we would, we'd be aghast. We'd say, what are you talking about? But this project can't afford that. We can't build a pump station and do all the signalized intersections for 4 blocks radius, blah, blah. Well, these guys did that. These guys agreed to that.
Right. And where are they now?
And I say it all the time.
Where are they now? That's right.
I have a list going that I present to the city, and I say, let me remind you. Do you remember when you were upset at us for fighting so hard against your requirement because we knew it was not viable? And you said, well, all of these guys agreed to it. There's all of those guys. They're wiped off the playing field.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was a major problem in our market. And I suspect that happens in localized markets all the time when, Vancouver became this kind of en vogue real estate play. But that was an issue. And going back to, there's going to be mature players. They're going to be on the playing field. The market will turn around eventually. Is it in 2027? Is it in 2028? I don't know. There's a lot of things that need to change before it does. We talked about immigration. We've talked about policy. We've talked about taxation, building code, capital. And I think once those things start to settle and there's more confidence, there's going to probably be a mature and robust production model with people that, you know them all, the household names.
Well, Beau, I really hope that you don't give up, that you keep advocating for our industry and get back on LinkedIn, do your YouTube videos because you are a very strong voice for the industry. And I can tell you, everybody around me, everybody I talk to really appreciates what you and your colleagues at Wesgroup are doing. It's a refreshing voice. It's a passionate voice. And you're offering practical, no-nonsense advice to our decision makers. And we need more of that. And I love seeing your signs all around the city. You guys are building great homes. And I just thank you. Thank you for building homes. Thank you for building infrastructure. Thank you for building our city. And I think people need to look at developers and home builders as you are heroes in the city, really. And I'm tired of the vilification, and we need to have more voices like you speaking out and telling us what it's like in the trenches. So thank you.
Oh, thanks very much for having me. And you guys do a pretty good job at Goodman as well on the advocacy front. So we appreciate that.
Okay. Well, we'll keep swapping notes.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Goodman Report podcast. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform, give us a 5-star rating, and leave a review. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at goodmanreport.com for the latest listings, market research, statistics, and industry news. Follow us on X and Instagram at Goodman Report, on Facebook at Goodman Commercial, and on LinkedIn under my name, Mark Goodman. On behalf of the entire Goodman team, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time. This podcast is produced by Podfather Creative.